Ma'am, I'm done asking. Step off this property now or you're going in cuffs.
You're standing on federal ground. I'm the site director. Check my credentials.
I don't care who you claim to be. Turn around.
Officer, if you touch me, you're ending.
On a crisp, bright Tuesday morning in October, Thorne received a dispatch call regarding a trespasser at the newly renovated Apex Logistics Hub. The trespasser in question was Dr. Evelyn Vance, a 52-year-old senior executive with the federal government. What Thorne did next, ignoring her position, mocking her authority, and ordering the woman who ran the facility to wait outside like a naughty child, would become a case study in how unchecked arrogance rots the foundation of law enforcement. Before we get into the details, where are you watching from today? If you believe that truth is the only disinfectant that works, please hit that subscribe button. We need your help to keep these stories in the light. The Apex Logistics Hub sits on the industrial fringe of the city, a sprawling complex of glass steel and high-security concrete barriers. It is a critical node in the federal supply chain handling sensitive logistics for the Department of Transportation and the GSA. It is not the kind of place where people wander in by accident. The perimeter is marked by 10-foot fences and signage warning of federal jurisdiction. It was 9:30 a.m. The autumn sun was cutting sharp shadows across the manicured lawn of the facility's entrance. The air was cold, the sky a piercing blue. Dr. Evelyn Vance had arrived at the facility at 8:45 a.m. She had been appointed as the federal site director 3 weeks prior, a role that capped a stellar 28-year career in public administration. Evelyn was a woman of immense gravity. She stood 5'9", wore a tailored navy pantsuit that cost more than Officer Thorne's monthly salary, and carried herself with the quiet, unshakable confidence of a woman who had managed crises in 3 different presidential administrations. She had spent a decade in the Inspector General's office, auditing billion-dollar defense contracts. She had led disaster relief logistics in the Gulf Coast. She was meticulous, fair, and utterly intolerant of incompetence. That morning, Evelyn was conducting an unannounced red team inspection of the facility's external security protocols before her official introduction meeting scheduled for 10:00 a.m. She wanted to see how the contracted security firm handled the perimeter when they didn't know the boss was watching. She parked her sedan in the visitor lot, hung her lanyard around her neck, though the badge was currently tucked into her blazer pocket, and began walking the fence line, taking notes on a digital tablet. She was checking for gaps in the fencing, looking at the camera angles and observing the response time of the gate guards. She looked exactly like what she was, a high-level administrator conducting an audit. But to the eyes of the man watching her from the security booth, she was something else entirely. She was a black woman walking around a high-value target with a tablet, and in his limited worldview that didn't look like leadership. It looked like a threat or perhaps a nuisance, and he was itching for a confrontation. Kyle Braddock was 29 years old and had been the site security manager for exactly 4 months. He was the type of man who treated a private security uniform like it was the armor of a knight. He had applied to the police academy twice and failed the psychological evaluation both times, too aggressive, too prone to impulsive decision-making. Now employed by a private contracting firm to guard the outer perimeter of the Apex Hub, he treated the facility as his personal kingdom. He spent his shifts monitoring the CCTV feeds, desperate to catch someone doing something wrong so he could exert a fraction of the authority he craved. When Braddock saw Dr. Vance walking along the north perimeter, pausing to photograph a rusted hinge on the secondary gate, his mind immediately categorized her. In his experience, the only people who walked around the perimeter were maintenance workers, lost delivery drivers, or people looking to steal copper wire. He didn't see the tailored suit. He didn't see the expensive tablet. He saw a black woman alone, and his bias filled in the rest of the picture. She was probably a disgruntled former employee or a solicitor trying to bypass the front desk. Braddock didn't radio his team. He didn't check the visitor logs. He adjusted his belt, put on his mirrored sunglasses, and marched out of the guard shack to confront her. He walked with a puffed-out chest, closing the distance between them with unnecessary speed. "Hey!" Braddock shouted from 50 feet away. "You stop right there!" Evelyn Vance didn't flinch. She finished typing a note about the rusted hinge, locked her tablet, and turned slowly to face the shouting man. She adjusted her glasses, her expression neutral. She was used to being addressed by senators and generals. The barking of a private security guard barely registered as a disturbance. "Good morning," Evelyn said, her voice calm and measured. "I noticed the secondary gate hinge is corroded. That needs to be logged for maintenance." Braddock stopped 3 feet from her, invading her personal space. "I didn't ask you about the hinge. I asked what you're doing here. This is a restricted federal facility. You can't just wander around playing with your iPad." "I am aware of what facility this is," Evelyn replied, her tone sharpening slightly. "I am the new site director. I'm conducting a perimeter audit." Braddock let out a short, derisive laugh. "Yeah, and I'm the Secretary of Defense. Look, lady, we don't have any site director listed for a walk-around today. You need to get off the property, now." Evelyn sighed, a sound of profound patience wearing thin. She reached for the pocket of her blazer. "If you will allow me to show you my credentials." "Don't reach for anything," Braddock yelled, his hand dropping to the pepper spray on his belt. "Keep your hands where I can see them. You know what, I'm not dealing with this. I'm calling the police. You're trespassing." "Mr. Braddock," Evelyn said, reading his name tag, "I strongly suggest you do not do that. If you call the police, you will be initiating a chain of events that will result in your termination. I am Dr. Evelyn Vance, SES Level 2. Call your supervisor inside. Verify my identity." "I'm not calling anyone except the cops," Braddock sneered. He pulled out his radio, but instead of calling the front desk, he dialed 911 on his personal cell phone, ensuring there would be no internal record of his mistake until it was too late. He reported a hostile trespasser refusing to leave federal property. Dr. Vance watched him, her face unreadable. She didn't argue further. She simply unlocked her tablet and began a new file, Incident Report, Security Personnel Conduct. She knew the police were coming. She assumed they would be professionals who would rectify the situation. She was wrong. Officer Derek Thorne was only 4 blocks away when the call came in. Disturbance at Apex Hub. Trespasser refusing to leave. Hostile. Thorne's disciplinary record was a minefield of sustained and not sustained complaints. There were 9 total complaints in 6 years. 4 involved rudeness to civilians. 2 involved escalation of force during routine traffic stops. His supervisors knew he was a liability, a hothead, who struggled to de-escalate situations, yet the union contracts and a shortage of patrol officers kept him on the street. Thorne viewed himself as a soldier in a war zone, not a public servant. When he heard hostile trespasser at a federal building, his adrenaline spiked. He didn't picture a grandmother or a bureaucrat. He pictured a threat. He hit his lights and sirens, speeding through the mid-morning traffic, convincing himself he was racing toward a dangerous situation. He pulled his cruiser up to the curb where Braddock was standing guard over Evelyn. Thorne exited the vehicle swiftly, his hand resting on his holster. He saw Braddock, a white male in a uniform, and Evelyn, a black woman, standing calmly with a tablet. In that split second, Thorne's brain made the same catastrophic calculation Braddock's had. Uniform equals good guy. Black woman equals suspect. "What's the problem here?" Thorne demanded, walking past Evelyn to address Braddock first. "Officer, thank God," Braddock said, playing the victim. "She's been loitering on the perimeter. I told her to leave and she started giving me attitude, claiming she runs the place, refuses to ID herself. I think she's casing the building." Thorne turned to Evelyn. He didn't see the expensive suit or the posture of a woman in command. He saw defiance. He saw someone who hadn't immediately cowered when he arrived. "Ma'am, you need to step away from the fence," Thorne barked. Evelyn looked at the officer. She saw the nameplate. Thorne. She noted the aggressive stance, the lack of investigative curiosity. "Officer Thorne, I am Dr. Evelyn Vance. I am the federal site director for this facility. This security guard refused to look at my credentials. I am asking you to look at them now." "I don't care who you say you are," Thorne interrupted, cutting her off with a wave of his hand. "The property manager wants you gone. That means you're trespassing. You need to clear out." "I cannot be trespassing on a facility that I manage," Evelyn stated, her voice icy. "I have my federal PIV card in my pocket. It authorizes me to be here." "It authorizes me to be anywhere in this building. If you arrest me, or if you remove me, you are violating federal law." Thorne stepped closer, invading her personal space just as Braddock had. He hated it when people quoted the law to him. He felt it was a direct challenge to his power. "Listen to me. I'm not going to ask you again. This is private property." "It is federal property," Evelyn corrected him. "It is property you are being told to leave," Thorne shouted. "You are causing a disturbance. You are scaring the employees. Now you can walk away, or you can go for a ride. Which is it?" The standoff had attracted an audience. A crew of construction workers repairing the sidewalk across the street had stopped their jackhammers. Several administrative assistants from the Apex building were watching from the glass lobby doors, confused. They recognized Dr. Vance. They had seen her photo in the welcome email sent out that Monday, but they were too far away to intervene, and the sight of a police officer made them hesitate. Evelyn Vance knew she was at a precipice. She had spent nearly 30 years working within the system, believing in the chain of command. She knew that if she physically resisted, she could be hurt or killed. But she also knew that yielding to this unlawful order would undermine her authority at the very facility she was supposed to lead. "Officer Thorne," Evelyn said, lowering her voice so that he had to lean in to hear her, a tactic she used in boardroom negotiations. "I am going to reach into my right pocket and pull out my federal identification. It is a hard card with a holographic chip. It identifies me as a member of the Senior Executive Service. That is the civilian equivalent of a general. If you look at it, this ends." "I said, keep your hands away from your pockets." Thorne snapped his hand, tightening on his baton. "I don't want to see your library card. I don't want to see your fake badge you bought online. I want you to leave." "I am not leaving," Evelyn said. Thorne's face reddened. "You need to wait outside. Get off the concrete, get on the public sidewalk, and wait there until I figure out what to do with you. You are not allowed on this site." "I am the site director," Evelyn repeated, emphasizing every syllable. "I am not waiting outside my own building." "That's it," Thorne said. "Turn around." "I am under no obligation to—" "Turn around now." Thorne grabbed Evelyn's left arm. The contact was shocking. Evelyn had not been manhandled since she was a child on the playground. To be grabbed by a municipal police officer while standing on federal ground was a violation so profound it took her breath away for a second. But she recovered instantly. "Officer, you are making a career-ending mistake," she said, not pulling away but not complying. "I am ordering you to release me." "And I'm arresting you for trespassing and failure to comply," Thorne grunted. He twisted her arm behind her back with excessive force. Evelyn winced as her shoulder joint strained, but she did not scream. She would not give them the satisfaction of a scream. "You are hurting me," she said calmly. "I have a previous rotator cuff injury. You are using excessive force." "Stop resisting, then," Thorne yelled, though she wasn't resisting. He pulled her other arm back. The handcuffs came out cold, heavy steel. He ratcheted them onto her wrists tight. Too tight. Braddock, the security guard, was smiling. He pulled out his phone and snapped a picture. "Got her," he muttered. "Told you she didn't belong." The sight of a 52-year-old woman in a business suit being handcuffed against a chain-link fence shifted the mood of the onlookers. The construction foreman, a burly man named Frank in his late 40s, walked over from across the street. He held his phone up, recording. "Hey, officer!" Frank shouted. She ain't fighting you. Take it easy on her arm. Back up, Thorne yelled over his shoulder. Mind your business or you're next. Thorne spun Evelyn around. Her blazer was rumpled, her hair slightly askew, but her dignity was intact. She looked Thorne dead in the eye. My tablet, she said. It is on the ground. It contains classified federal data. If you leave it there, you are responsible for a security breach. Thorne looked at the tablet lying on the grass where it had fallen during the scuffle. He kicked it toward Braddock. Hold on to that. Evidence. He then grabbed Evelyn by the upper arm and marched her toward his patrol car. The shame of being paraded like a criminal burned, but Evelyn converted that heat into cold, hard memory. She was memorizing everything. The time, the license plate, the look on Braddock's face, the pressure of the cuffs. You're going to sit in the back and think about why you can't follow simple orders, Thorne said, opening the rear door. The back of the cruiser smelled of stale sweat and disinfectant. I am not a child officer, Evelyn said as she was shoved inside. And you are not the law. You are a servant of the law who has lost his way. Thorne slammed the door, silencing her. He walked around to the driver's seat, feeling a rush of power. He had cleaned up the street. He had removed the problem. He picked up his radio. Dispatch 1 female in custody, trespassing, resisting, en route to the precinct. He didn't bother to ask for her name again. He didn't check her pockets for the ID she had begged him to look at. He was so convinced of his own narrative that she was a liar, a trespasser, a nobody that he felt no need to verify. This is the danger of confirmation bias. It blinds us to the cliff edge until we have already stepped off. The drive to the 12th precinct took 15 minutes. Evelyn sat in the back, her wrists throbbing. She closed her eyes and practiced a breathing technique she used before congressional hearings. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. She needed to be razor sharp when they arrived. Thorne hummed along to the radio, completely oblivious to the radioactive isotope he was transporting in his back seat. He pulled into the sally port of the precinct, parked, and hauled Evelyn out. Last chance to tell me who you really are, Thorne mocked as he walked her through the heavy steel doors into the booking area. Maybe I'll go easy on the charges if you admit you were lying. Evelyn said nothing. She saved her words for someone who could read. They walked up to the booking desk. The desk sergeant was a man named Miller, a 58-year-old veteran who was 3 months away from retirement. Miller had seen everything. He had seen good cops, bad cops, and stupid cops. He knew Thorne fell into the latter category. Miller looked up from his computer and saw Evelyn. He saw the suit. He saw the shoes, Ferragamos. He noted his wife had a pair. He saw the handcuffs. And he saw the look on her face, which wasn't fear. It was the look of a predator waiting for the cage to open. What do we have, Thorne? Miller asked, his voice weary. Trespassing at the Apex hub, Thorne said, tossing the keys on the counter. Refused to leave, refused to ID, resisted arrest. Miller looked at Evelyn. Ma'am, is this true? Sergeant, Evelyn said, her voice clear and authoritative. My name is Dr. Evelyn Vance. I am the Federal Site Director for the Apex Logistics Hub. My credentials are in my right blazer pocket. Officer Thorne refused to examine them. I would like you to remove these handcuffs and examine them now. The room went very quiet. The other officers in the booking area stopped talking. Sergeant Miller looked at Thorne. Thorne rolled his eyes. She's been saying that for 20 minutes. It's a delusion. Miller stood up. He walked around the desk. Thorne, give me the key. Sarge, she's... Give me the key. Thorne handed it over. Miller unlocked the cuffs. Evelyn rubbed her wrists, revealing deep red indentations. May I? Evelyn asked, gesturing to her pocket. Miller nodded. Slowly. Evelyn reached in and pulled out a black leather wallet. She flipped it open. Inside was the undeniable heavy card of a high-ranking federal official. The holographic seal of the United States shimmered under the fluorescent lights. Below it was a gold badge, not a store-bought toy, but the heavy, serialized badge of the Federal Senior Executive Service. Miller took the wallet. He looked at the ID. He looked at the expiration date. He looked at the security clearance level top secret/SCI. Miller felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at Thorne, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and pity. "Thorne," Miller whispered, "do you know what this is?" "It's fake, Sarge. Look at it. She printed it." "Shut up!" Miller roared, slamming his hand on the counter. "It's not fake. This is a PIV card with a microchip. This is a federal badge. You arrested the director of the site you were called to protect." Thorne froze. The certainty that had armored him for the last hour began to crack. She was outside. The guard said." "The guard," Miller scoffed. "You let a rent-a-cop tell you to arrest a federal executive." Evelyn stepped forward. "Sergeant, I need a phone. I need to call the Federal Protective Service and the city attorney, and I need this officer's badge number recorded in the log immediately." The next 20 minutes were a blur of panicked activity for the precinct and a slow, deliberate dismantling of Officer Thorne's life. The watch commander. Captain Reynolds stormed down from his office. He was a man who hated lawsuits, and he could smell a multi-million-dollar one brewing in his lobby. Reynolds walked straight to Evelyn. "Dr. Vance, I am Captain Reynolds. On behalf of the department, I am horrified. We are going to process your release immediately. We will drive you back to your vehicle or anywhere you need to go." "I am not going anywhere until I file a formal complaint," Evelyn said, standing by the desk, rubbing her bruised wrist. "And I want that officer disarmed. I do not feel safe with him in the room." Reynolds turned to Thorne. Thorne was standing in the corner looking pale. The reality of what he had done, the arrogance, the refusal to listen, the sheer stupidity of it was crashing down on him. "Thorne," Reynolds said, his voice low and dangerous. "Badge and gun. Now." "Captain, I was following protocol," Thorne stammered. "She wouldn't listen." "She is a federal director," Reynolds shouted. "You don't arrest people because they hurt your feelings. You verify, you investigate. Give me the badge." Thorne unclipped his badge. He unbuckled his gun belt. The sound of the heavy equipment hitting the desk was the sound of his career ending. He was stripped of his authority in front of the very woman he had tried to humiliate. Evelyn watched him. She didn't smile. There was no joy in this. "Officer Thorne," she said, "you demanded I wait outside. You demanded I submit. You assumed that because of how I look, I could not possibly be who I said I was. You had every opportunity to check. You chose not to. That was a choice. And now you will live with the consequences of that choice." Thorne couldn't meet her eyes. He looked at the floor. He was escorted out of the room by 2 other officers placed on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation that everyone knew would result in termination. Evelyn retrieved her credentials. "Captain, I will be contacting my legal counsel, and I expect the body camera footage to be preserved, all of it." "It will be, ma'am," Reynolds said, defeated. The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. The video from the construction workers hit the internet before Evelyn even left the precinct. The image of the federal site director in handcuffs standing tall while Officer Thorne shoved her became an instant symbol of systemic failure. The lawsuit filed by Dr. Evelyn Vance against the city and the private security firm was unassailable. It alleged false arrest, excessive force, civil rights violations, and negligence. The city attorney didn't even try to fight it. They knew that putting Thorne on a witness stand would be a disaster. They settled for $6.4 million. The security firm, terrified of losing their federal contract, settled for an undisclosed amount, likely in the 7 figures. Kyle Braddock, the security guard who started it all, was fired before the sun set on that Tuesday. He was blacklisted from the security industry. The last reports heard of him, he was working in a warehouse far away from any position of authority. Derek Thorne was terminated following the internal affairs investigation. The review board found that his refusal to verify credentials constituted gross negligence and bias-based policing. He was decertified, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. At 34, he had to start over forever, known as the cop who arrested the boss. Dr. Vance donated a portion of her settlement to a legal defense fund for those who couldn't afford to fight back. She remained the site director of the Apex Hub. Every morning when she walked through those gates, the new security guards stood up straight, checked her ID with respect, and saluted. Not because they were afraid of being sued, but because she had taught them exactly what dignity looks like. This story isn't just about a bad cop or a settlement check. It's about the dangerous assumption that authority is visual, that it looks like a uniform or a certain skin color or a loud voice. Officer Thorne and Guard Braddock looked at a woman of color and saw a subject to be controlled, not a leader to be respected. They assumed that their power was absolute and hers was non-existent. But power doesn't come from a badge or a loud voice. True power comes from competence, from knowing who you are, and from holding your ground when the world tries to move you. Dr. Vance didn't scream, she didn't fight, she didn't lower herself. She waited. And when the truth came out, it hit harder than any baton. We have to ask ourselves, how many people don't have a federal badge in their pocket? How many people are told to wait outside and have no way to prove they belong inside? What do you think? Should officers be personally liable for settlements when they ignore clear evidence? Or is this just the cost of doing business? Leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you believe in accountability, share this story. Let's make sure everyone knows that respect isn't a request, it's a requirement. Until next time, take care of each other.
Step away from the elevator, now.
Officer, you're making a mistake. I own this building.
You don't own anything in a hoodie. Turn around, hands on the wall.
I'm the CEO. My name is on the front of this tower. Check my ID.
I said don't move, stop resisting!
I'm not resisting.
The body camera footage tells a story that is difficult to watch but impossible to look away from. It captured the cold, hard marble of the lobby floor, the echo of the handcuffs clicking shut, and the absolute shock in the eyes of a man who had built the very building he was now being dragged out of. Officer Kyle Branning, 29 years old and fueled by a dangerous cocktail of adrenaline and assumption, had absolutely no idea that the intruder he was manhandling was Marcus Thorne. He didn't know that the man in the faded majestic blue hoodie and running shoes wasn't a burglar. He was the CEO of Thorne Logistics, a logistics empire that moved freight across 4 continents. He was a man who sat on the boards of 3 major universities. He was a man who had lunch with governors and dinner with senators, and now he was a man being arrested for trespassing in a skyscraper that bore his own name on the exterior in 10-foot steel letters. Before we unravel the layers of this infuriating and heartbreaking story, I need you to take a second. Pause the video, scroll down, and let me know where you are watching from. Your city, your state, your country. It's important to know that this community spans the globe because the issues we talk about here, bias, power, and the abuse of authority, are universal. And if you believe that justice should be blind to the clothes you wear and the color of your skin, hit that subscribe button right now. You are not going to want to miss a single detail of what happens next. Marcus Thorne was 58 years old, a self-made titan of industry. He had grown up in the shadow of the steel mills in Pittsburgh, worked his way through engineering school, and built a company that revolutionized supply chain management. He was known in the business world for his intellect, his philanthropy, and his unwavering calmness under pressure. He didn't flash his wealth. He drove a 5-year-old sedan to work most days, preferring to stay low profile. On this particular Saturday morning, the office was closed. The towering glass structure in downtown Chicago was silent, save for the hum of the HVAC systems and the security personnel in the control room. Marcus had come in for a simple reason. He needed a physical file from his office, safe, a merger document that was too sensitive to trust to the cloud. He was dressed for comfort, baggy jeans, a comfortable hoodie from his alma mater, and running sneakers. He looked like a dad on a weekend errand run, which is exactly what he was. He parked his car in his reserved spot in the underground garage, bypassed the main lobby desk because he had his key card and headed for the executive elevators. But there was a new variable in the equation that morning. A new security guard barely 2 weeks on the job monitoring the cameras. He didn't recognize Marcus. He saw a black man in a hoodie walking with purpose toward the executive suite elevators on a Saturday. He didn't check the authorized access log. He didn't zoom in to see the key card in Marcus's hand. He saw a stereotype. He picked up the phone and dialed 911. "I have an intruder," he told the dispatcher. "Black male refusal to stop at the desk heading to the upper floors. Looks like he's trying to sneak in." That call set into motion a chain of events that would cost the city millions and ruin careers. Officer Kyle Branning was the responding unit. He was young, ambitious, and had a reputation in the precinct for being proactive, a code word that veteran officers knew often meant reckless. Branning heard intruder and sneak, and his mind made up the rest of the story before he even put his car in park. He arrived at the Thorn Logistics Tower with his siren off, wanting to catch the suspect in the act. He burst through the revolving doors, his hand already resting on his holster, looking for a threat. He found Marcus Thorn standing by the elevator bank, pressing the up button, holding a file folder and a coffee cup. Marcus looked up as the officer approached, offering a polite, albeit confused, smile. "Good morning, officer," Marcus said, his voice deep and steady. "Is there a problem?" Branning didn't return the greeting. He closed the distance, aggressively invading Marcus's personal space. "Step away from the elevator. Hands where I can see them." Marcus frowned, his brow furrowing. "Excuse me, I think there's a misunderstanding. I'm going up to my office." "I said step away from the elevator." Branning barked, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "We got a call about an intruder. You fit the description." Marcus didn't step back. He stood his ground, not out of defiance, but out of the sheer certainty of his position. "Officer, I am not an intruder. My name is Marcus Thorn. I own this building. I'm the CEO of this company." It was the truth. It was a verifiable, easily proven fact. But Officer Branning wasn't listening for facts. He was listening for compliance. And in his eyes, a black man in a hoodie claiming to own a 40-story skyscraper wasn't a fact. It was a lie. A bold, arrogant lie. "You own the building." Branning repeated, his tone dripping with sarcasm. He looked Marcus up and down, sneering at the sneakers and the faded hoodie. "Right. And I'm the King of England. Turn around and put your hands on the wall." "Officer, look at the signage on the wall behind the front desk," Marcus said, keeping his hands visible but refusing to turn around. "It says Thorn Logistics. My last name is Thorn. If you let me reach into my back pocket, I can show you my driver's license and my corporate identification." "I told you to turn around," Branning shouted, taking a step closer. The distance between them was now less than 2 feet. "I'm not going to ask you again. You are trespassing on private property." "I cannot trespass on property that I own," Marcus replied, his voice remaining terrifyingly calm. This was the voice he used in boardrooms when hostile takeover attempts were made. It was a voice of absolute authority. "I have a key card in my hand that unlocks every door in this building, including the elevator lockout. If I were an intruder, how would I have gotten past the garage gate? How would I have called the elevator?" Branning wasn't processing the logic. He was experiencing what psychologists call confirmation bias in real time. He had decided Marcus was a criminal. Therefore, Marcus's calmness wasn't innocence. It was the behavior of a sociopath. His explanation wasn't truth. It was a fabrication. "People steal key cards all the time," Branning snapped. "And you probably tailgated someone into the garage. Now, for the last time, get on the wall or I'm going to put you on the ground." "I am not getting on the wall," Marcus stated. "I have done nothing wrong. You are operating on a false premise. I am asking you to de-escalate and verify my identity. Call your supervisor. Or better yet, ask the security guard who called you to come out here." I don't need a supervisor to handle a trespasser, Branning said, his hand tightening on his baton. And I don't need a security guard to tell me what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a suspect refusing a lawful order. It is not a lawful order if there is no reasonable suspicion of a crime, Marcus countered. He knew the law. He had a team of 50 lawyers on retainer and had spent decades dealing with regulatory compliance. He knew the Fourth Amendment better than the man standing in front of him. You are detaining me based on a vague description and your own bias regarding my appearance. That is unconstitutional. Stop acting like a lawyer, Branning spat. You're making this worse for yourself. Have you ever been in a situation where you were telling the absolute truth, but the person in power simply refused to hear it because you didn't look the way they thought you should? It is a feeling of helplessness that can turn into rage very quickly. But Marcus Thorne did not rage. He calculated. He knew there were cameras in the lobby. He knew the security feed was recording. He knew that every word he said and every move this officer made was being preserved for posterity. I am going to reach into my pocket slowly, Marcus said, broadcasting his movements. I am going to retrieve my wallet. Don't do it, Branning yelled, his hand moving to his taser now. Don't you reach for anything. Officer, I am trying to prevent you from making a career-ending mistake, Marcus said, freezing his hand mid-motion. My ID is in my pocket. It proves who I am. Why are you afraid of identification? Because I don't know what you have in those pockets, Branning said. You could have a weapon. I have a wallet and a cell phone, and keys to a Mercedes, Marcus said. If you are afraid, you can retrieve them yourself. I consent to a limited search for identification only. This was an olive branch. A suspect granting consent to search for ID is usually a de-escalation technique. It allows the officer to feel safe while verifying the story. But Branning was too far gone. He felt challenged. He felt disrespected. He saw a man who wasn't knowing his place. I'm done talking, Branning said. He lunged forward. He didn't use a verbal warning. He grabbed Marcus by the shoulder of his hoodie and spun him around. Marcus stumbled but didn't fight back. He allowed himself to be turned, but the sheer force Branning used caused Marcus to lose his footing on the slick marble. He went down to one knee. Stop resisting, Branning screamed a command for the cameras more than the suspect. I am not resisting, Marcus said clearly from his knees. I am complying. You are using excessive force. Shut up. Branning jammed his knee into Marcus's back, forcing the 58-year-old executive flat onto the cold floor. The impact knocked the wind out of him. The coffee cup he had been holding skittered across the lobby, spilling dark liquid over the pristine white stone. The file folder slid under a leather armchair. The scene was surreal. One of the wealthiest men in the state was pinned to the floor of his own headquarters, his cheek pressed against the stone while a police officer less than half his age wrenched his arms behind his back. You are making a mistake. Marcus wheezed the weight of the officer on his lower back, making it hard to breathe. Check my ID. I'll check it when you're in the cell. Branning grunted, pulling the handcuffs from his belt. He ratcheted them tight. Too tight. He wanted them to hurt. He wanted this man to feel the power of the state. You're under arrest for criminal trespassing, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct. Trespassing, Marcus whispered, closing his eyes for a moment to center himself. In my own building. Yeah, tell it to the judge, Branning said. He hauled Marcus up by the handcuff chain, a maneuver designed to cause maximum pain in the shoulder sockets. Marcus grimaced but remained silent. He stood tall despite the hoodie being disheveled and dust on his face. Just then the elevator doors pinged. They slid open and a woman stepped out. It was Sarah Jenkins, the company's chief financial officer. She was 62, a white woman with silver hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a tailored business suit. She had come in to work on the same merger files. She stopped dead in her tracks, dropping her briefcase. Marcus? She gasped. She looked from her boss to the police officer. "What in God's name is happening?" Branning spun Marcus around. "Back off, ma'am. This is a police situation." "That is Marcus Thorne," Sarah shouted, stepping forward. "He is the CEO of this company. What are you doing?" Branning paused for a split second. Doubt flickered in his eyes, but his ego smothered it instantly. "He's a trespasser who resisted arrest. I don't care what he told you." "He didn't tell me anything," Sarah said, her voice shaking with indignation. "I have worked for him for 20 years. That is the owner of this building. You are arresting the owner. Ma'am, step back or you're going to be arrested for obstruction," Branning threatened. "I don't know who you are, but you're interfering with an active arrest." "I am the CFO," Sarah yelled, pulling out her phone. "I am calling the chief of police right now. You need to take those handcuffs off him this instant." "Do not call anyone," Branning ordered, pointing a finger at her. "Put the phone away." "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice calm and commanding, cutting through the chaos. "Let him do it." Sarah looked at him, tears of frustration in her eyes. "Marcus, this is insane." "Let him do it," Marcus repeated, locking eyes with her. "Don't interfere. Just record it. Take pictures. And call legal. Tell them to meet me at the precinct. Do not engage with him further. He is looking for a reason to arrest you too." "You got that right," Branning sneered. "Now move." He shoved Marcus toward the revolving doors. Sarah held her phone up her hands, trembling, recording the entire walk of shame. She captured the image of Marcus Thorne, the man who had donated millions to the city's parks and libraries, being marched out of his own front door like a common criminal. As they exited the building, the cool Saturday air hit Marcus's face. Passers-by on the sidewalk stopped and stared. A few took out phones. They saw a black man in handcuffs and a white cop. They didn't know the context, but the visual was all too familiar. Marcus kept his head high. He didn't hide his face. He had nothing to be ashamed of. The shame, he knew, belonged entirely to the man pushing him toward the patrol car. "Get in," Branning said, opening the back door and pushing Marcus's head down roughly as he shoved him into the plastic seat. The car smelled of stale sweat and disinfectant. Marcus maneuvered his body as best he could with his hands cuffed behind him, sitting awkwardly against the hard plastic. Branning slammed the door. He walked around to the driver's seat, feeling a rush of triumph. He had neutralized a threat. He had taken control. He got in radioed dispatch. "One male in custody, transporting to central booking." "Copy that." Dispatch crackled back. Marcus sat in the back, staring at the mesh partition. He wasn't thinking about the pain in his wrists or the humiliation of the moment. He was thinking about the lawsuit. He was drafting the complaint in his head. Unlawful seizure, false arrest, excessive force, violation of civil rights. He was thinking about the rigorous internal audit he was going to demand of the police department. Officer Branning turned the key and pulled out into traffic, whistling a low tune. He thought he had just done a good day's work. He thought he was a hero. He had absolutely no idea that he was driving a hearse for his own career. The ride to the precinct took 15 minutes. Branning didn't speak to Marcus, and Marcus didn't say a word to Branning. The silence in the car was heavy. Marcus used the time to memorize details. The time on the dashboard clock, the speed they were traveling, the fact that Branning was tapping on his phone at red lights against regulation. Every detail was ammunition. They arrived at the central precinct. Branning pulled into the sally port, the garage door rumbling shut behind them. He hauled Marcus out of the car. "Let's go. No funny business," Branning said. They walked through the heavy steel doors into the processing area. It was a busy Saturday. Drunks from the night before were being released. New arrests were being brought in. The air was thick with noise and the smell of industrial cleaner. Branning marched Marcus up to the booking desk. Behind the high counter sat Sergeant Tom Kowalski. Kowalski was a dinosaur, a 56-year-old veteran with 30 years on the force. He had seen everything. He knew every frequent flyer, every local politician, and every major player in the city. He was looking down at paperwork when Branning approached. "Got a trespasser from the Thorn Logistics Tower," Branning announced proudly. "Resisted arrest. Refused to ID." Kowalski didn't look up immediately. "Trespassing at the Thorn Tower. That place is a fortress. How'd he get in?" "Says he owns the place." Branning chuckled, rolling his eyes. "Claims he's the CEO, giving me attitude the whole time." Kowalski stopped writing. The pen froze in his hand. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes moved from Branning's smug face to the man standing in handcuffs. He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the face. He looked at the dignified posture. Kowalski's face drained of color. His jaw literally dropped. He stood up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the file cabinets with a loud crash. "Oh my God," Kowalski whispered. "What?" Branning asked, confused by the reaction. "You know this guy, some frequent flyer?" Kowalski didn't answer Branning. He rushed around the desk, moving faster than he had in 10 years. He ran up to Marcus. "Mr. Thorn," Kowalski stammered. "Mr. Thorn, I am so sorry." Branning froze. "Sarge, what are you doing?" "Shut up, Branning." Kowalski roared a sound so loud the entire booking room went silent. He turned back to Marcus, his hands hovering over the handcuffs but afraid to touch them without permission. "Mr. Thorn, please allow me to remove these. There has been a terrible mistake." "The mistake is his sergeant," Marcus said, nodding toward Branning. "But yes, you may remove them." Kowalski fumbled for his key. He unlocked the cuffs with trembling hands. As soon as the metal clicked open, Marcus brought his hands forward, rubbing his wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had bitten into his skin. "Sarge, what is going on?" Branning asked, his voice rising in panic. "That guy is a suspect. He was trespassing." "You idiot," Kowalski hissed, turning on Branning with a look of pure venom. "You absolute moron. That is Marcus Thorn. He owns the building. He owns half the block. He's the chairman of the Police Foundation Board. He buys our bulletproof vests." Branning felt the blood leave his head. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He looked at Marcus, really looked at him for the first time. The air of authority, the expensive running shoes, the face he had seen in newspapers usually wearing a suit, but unmistakably the same man. I didn't know," Branning stammered. He was wearing a hoodie." "Oh, spare me," Marcus said, his voice cutting like a razor. He looked at Branning with cold, hard eyes. "I told you who I was. I offered you my ID. I offered you my key card. You didn't not know. You chose not to know." Marcus turned to Kowalski. "Sergeant, I want the watch commander down here. I want the chief called at home. And I want this officer's body camera footage seized immediately before it can be accidentally corrupted. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir," Kowalski said. "Lieutenant Miller is in his office. I'll get him right now." "And, Sergeant," Marcus added, "I am not leaving until I have copies of the arrest report and the booking sheet. I want everything on paper. If this man so much as typed a letter into the system, I want a copy of it." The next hour in the precinct was a study in controlled chaos. Lieutenant Miller, the watch commander, came down looking like he was about to have a heart attack. He ushered Marcus into his office, offering him coffee water, a chair, anything. "Mr. Thorn, I cannot apologize enough," Miller said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Officer Branning he's relatively new. He made a severe error in judgment." "Error in judgment implies he weighed the options and chose poorly," Marcus said, sitting straight-backed in the chair. "This wasn't judgment. This was profiling, pure and simple. He saw a black man in a hoodie and decided I was a criminal. He refused to look at my ID. He refused to verify my story. He assaulted me." "Assaulted?" Miller winced. "He threw me to the ground. He put his knee in my back. I have bruises on my wrists and my shoulder, Marcus said calmly. I will be documenting these injuries with a physician immediately upon leaving here. While they were talking, the station doors opened and a phalanx of lawyers walked in. Leading them was David Ross Thorne, Logistics' general counsel. He was a shark in a three-piece suit. He bypassed the front desk and walked straight to the back, followed by Sarah Jenkins. "Where is he?" Ross demanded. Kowalski pointed to the lieutenant's office. Ross stormed in. "Marcus, are you all right?" "I'm fine, David," Marcus said. "But I want you to handle the evidence preservation. I want the 911 call. I want the dispatch logs. I want the body cam. I want the lobby security footage from our building secured." "Already done?" Sarah said. "I pulled the hard drives from the security room myself before I came here. We have everything." Officer Branning was sitting in the break room stripped of his weapon and badge, staring at the wall. He had been placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. The union rep had been called, but even the rep, upon hearing the details, had let out a long, weary sigh. Arresting a federal judge or a billionaire CEO were the two things you just didn't do unless you had a murder weapon in their hand. The chief of police, Chief Henderson, arrived 20 minutes later. He was in golf clothes, having been pulled off the fourth hole. He walked into the lieutenant's office and extended a hand to Marcus. "Marcus," Henderson said, his tone pained. "I don't even know what to say." "Don't say anything, Jim," Marcus said, not shaking the hand. "Because anything you say, my lawyer is going to write down. We are friends, but today we are adversaries. Your officer violated my civil rights. He humiliated me in my own place of business. And if he does this to me, Jim, if he does this to Marcus Thorne, what is he doing to the kid who works at the grocery store? What is he doing to the mechanic coming home from the night shift?" Henderson looked at the floor. "We will investigate. Fully." "You won't just investigate," Marcus said, standing up. "You are going to face a federal lawsuit. I am going to sue the department, the city, and Officer Branning personally. Not because I need the money, but because you need to understand that this behavior is expensive. It is too expensive to tolerate." Marcus walked out of the office, his legal team surrounding him like a shield. As he passed the break room, he saw Branning through the glass. The young officer looked small, defeated. Marcus felt no pity. He felt only determination. The release of the footage 3 days later was a nuclear event in the media. Marcus had refused a quiet settlement regarding the release of the video. He wanted it public. His legal team petitioned the court for immediate release in the interest of public safety, and the judge granted it. The video, titled "CEO Arrested in Own Building," garnered 4 million views in the first 24 hours. It was everywhere. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. The commentary was scathing. People watched Officer Branning's arrogance. They watched him sneer at Marcus's claim of ownership. They heard the phrase, "I'm the King of England," and it became a meme of police incompetence. But the most damning part was the refusal to look at the ID. He had the ID in his hand, one commentator noted on a nightly news panel. He was begging the officer to look at it, and the officer refused. That is the definition of willful ignorance. The internet sleuths went to work. Within a week, other stories about Officer Branning began to surface. A college student who said Branning had detained him for walking his dog in the wrong neighborhood. A delivery driver who had been handcuffed for double parking while making a delivery. The pattern was there. It had always been there. But nobody had listened because the victims didn't have the power of Marcus Thorne. The lawsuit was filed on a Tuesday morning. It was a masterpiece of legal drafting. It alleged violations of the 4th and 14th Amendments, false arrest battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It demanded $20 million in damages. The city attorney read the complaint and nearly wept. He called the mayor. "We have to settle," he said. "We cannot go to trial. If a jury sees that video, they will give him the keys to the city." "Can we offer him $1 million?" the mayor asked. He spends $1 million on landscaping. The city attorney replied. It's not about the money for him. He wants blood. He wants policy changes. And he did. Marcus Thorne didn't just want a check. He wanted a consent decree. He wanted mandatory retraining for the entire force. He wanted a civilian oversight board with teeth. He used his leverage ruthlessly. He went on talk shows not to complain, but to educate. He sat calmly in his tailored suits, explaining the law to the American public. If I had resisted, Marcus told a stunned morning show host, if I had pulled away, I might be dead, and the narrative would have been suspect grappled with officer. I survived because I surrendered my dignity to save my life. No citizen should have to make that trade. Officer Branning was fired 6 weeks later. The internal investigation was swift. The reasonable suspicion defense collapsed immediately because Branning had refused to investigate the exculpatory evidence, the ID that was offered to him. His termination letter cited gross incompetence, bias-based policing, and conduct unbecoming. But for Marcus, that wasn't the end. The settlement negotiations took 6 months. The city tried to drag it out, hoping the news cycle would move on. But Marcus kept the pressure up. He funded billboards in the city with quotes from the Constitution. He held town halls. Finally, the city capitulated. They agreed to a settlement of $8.5 million. It was the largest individual payout for a wrongful arrest in the city's history. But the morning the settlement was announced, Marcus Thorne did something that surprised everyone. He held a press conference on the steps of the Thorne Logistics Tower. I am accepting this settlement, Marcus announced to the crowd of reporters, because the city must pay a price for violating the rights of its citizens, but I am not keeping a dime. He gestured to a group of lawyers standing behind him. Today I am launching the Thorne Legal Defense Fund. This $8. $5 million will be the seed money for a non-profit law firm dedicated solely to representing individuals who have been victims of police misconduct but cannot afford representation. We will fight for the delivery driver, the student, the mechanic. We will make sure that every Officer Branning out there knows that if they violate the Constitution, there will be a lawyer waiting for them. The crowd erupted in applause. Kyle Branning watched the press conference from his parents' living room. He was unemployed. He had lost his certification, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. He had become a pariah. His friends had distanced themselves. He was facing a civil lawsuit from the guy he had arrested before Marcus, a case that had been reopened due to the publicity. He turned off the TV. He finally understood what Marcus had told him in the lobby. I am trying to prevent you from making a career-ending mistake. He had been warned. He just hadn't listened. The aftermath of the incident changed the landscape of the city. The police department implemented new protocols for owner-initiated calls requiring officers to verify ownership before taking action. The Thorne Rule became a standard part of the academy curriculum. Marcus Thorne went back to work. He continued to run his company. He continued to serve on boards. But he was different. The experience had hardened him, but it had also opened his heart to a struggle he had thought he had risen above. One afternoon, a year later, Marcus was walking through the lobby of his building. He saw a young black courier arguing with the front desk security. The guard, a new guy, was giving the kid a hard time about his delivery pass. Marcus stopped. He watched the guard's body language, the aggression, the assumption. Marcus walked over. Is there a problem? The guard looked up, saw the boss, and snapped to attention. No, sir. Just checking this guy's credentials. He looks like he has a job to do, Marcus said softly. He turned to the courier. Let me see your pass, son. The courier handed it over. It was valid. He's good, Marcus said to the guard. Let him up, and treat him with the same respect you would treat me. Do you understand? Yes, sir. The guard gulped. Marcus watched the courier get into the elevator. The young man looked back at Marcus and nodded a silent thank you. Marcus nodded back. He realized then that his money hadn't protected him that Saturday morning. His suits hadn't protected him, but his voice could protect others now. And that was a legacy worth more than the building he stood in. This story isn't just about a bad cop or a rich CEO. It's about the fragility of freedom. It's about how quickly your rights can be stripped away by someone who sees your face and decides you don't belong. Marcus Thorne won because he had the power to fight back. But what about the people who don't? What about the people whose stories end on the booking room floor? That is why we tell these stories. To remind us that authority without accountability is tyranny, and that checking a bias is always, always better than ruining a life. What would you have done if you were Marcus? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have fought back? And do you think the $8.5 million settlement was enough to teach the city a lesson? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And please share this story, because the more we shine a light on these injustices, the fewer places there are for them to hide. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.